about Putin's new luxurious palace and the catastrophic forecast from economists for 2026. How much harder will it become for ordinary Russians to survive? We'll discuss this and other important topics in more detail today on the program, Your Money. I'm Vladimir Timoshenko. Welcome. We're starting the new season of Your Money with a detailed forecast from respected financial experts for 2026. What exactly does it hold for the future of the Russian economy? A significant drop in oil prices, new harsh U.S. sanctions, and record-breaking spending on the ongoing war. All of this will trigger a major chain reaction, threatening the Kremlin with a severe banking crisis, defaults, and a collapse of the consumer market. Putin's Russia is entering a zone of turbulence from which, imagine, it might not make it out. The evidence is coming up next.
Thousands of citizens of the aggressor country rang in the new year 2026 in total cold and without water. In the village of Atamanovka in Zabaikalsky Krai, 3,000 people lived without heating for almost a week in minus 20-degree frost. Besides the accident on the heating main, pipes with cold water are constantly bursting there, and it's the same all over Russia.
A major utility accident in Krasnodar Krai. There, more than 43,000 people were left without heating, water, and electricity. Belorechynsk was completely cut off. The accidents there started back on the evening of December 30th. Electricity appeared on some streets only the day before, but there is still no heat or hot water either in the city or in the Belorechynsk district.
Just in the first month of the heating season, by mid-December, 123 cases of large-scale heating outages in residential buildings were recorded in Russia. Such widespread man-made emergencies reveal the real state of the Russian economy.
This is a picture of what is happening and will continue to happen to Russia's economy. The nose cone breaks in half and crashes to the ground along with the pilots.
Many industries in decline demonstrate just how bad things are in Russia. But utility accidents hit the population especially hard. These disasters are not just frosty surprises, but the logical result of a severely deficit budget. Putin doesn't care how many dozens or hundreds of Russians are freezing. He spends all the money on the war. That's why regional authorities are cutting spending on utilities, which means less money for network repairs, whose wear and tear in the regions, according to official data, ranges from 40 to 80%. But things won't get any better. There will be a huge budget deficit.
Even in the very middle. In the upcoming new fiscal year, the projected budget deficit will be between 6 and 8 trillion rubles, rather than totaling 3 to 8 trillion as you currently have planned in your budget.
The Kremlin has already built a guaranteed hole into the treasury. This is due to the enormous war expenses and the clearly overestimated price of Russian oil.
The budget of the Russian Federation is based on an average annual oil price of $59 per barrel. In other words, that's a completely unrealistic figure. Today, the actual price of euros is 50, the actual price of euros is 50, but that's the spot price of euros at 50. That is, the contract price of euros is even lower. Do you see what the problem is? The problem is that Russia, there are simply no other reliable sources available. Russian officials themselves now openly admit that instead of 45% of the total Russian budget being filled by oil dollars this year, it will actually be only 27%.
The Central Bank of the Russian Federation has already warned that without an increase in oil prices, the budget will have to be cut. If in 2026 Russian oil remains at its current levels, the authorities will have to revise what was laid out in the budget. $59 per barrel, which means expenses will have to be reduced. Analysts are certain that the price of Russian oil will not only fail to stay at its previous level, but will continue to fall. This is a global trend. And even the most significant international shocks have not managed to affect it.
Neither the tension, to put it mildly, in Venezuela that preceded Maduro's overthrow, nor the protests in Iran, which are said to signal the possible imminent collapse of the Ayatollah's regime, had any effect on them. The price situation on the global oil market, and that's very interesting, prices kept falling.
Except for the low revenues from oil. Experts are warning about a banking crisis. Non-payments are rising. Companies are taking on more loans, while the economy is declining.
Imagine that one morning you wake up, slowly rub your eyes and say, oh, we've just discovered that there are a staggering 10 trillion in bad debts in the Russian banking system. As they put it, a time bomb has been planted under the Russian banking system. The most interesting thing is that this is already the second year, says the Center for Macroeconomic Analysis and Short-Term Forecasting, which has been predicting a crisis in Russia in 2025 all along. But apparently the state has managed to avert this crisis, seemingly by secretly, absolutely secretly, injecting money into the capital of the largest state-owned banks. But now SMAC is analyzing the situation. They are once again saying that by September 2026, there will be an acute banking crisis. Therefore, as they say, not all banks will be able to cover it. Not all banks will be able to solve it. Banks won't be able to resolve the entire problem in the economy.
Meanwhile, Russian citizens themselves are facing new levels of inflation. Russia is preparing for a sharp rise in electronics prices. Sellers are warning that in 2026, smartphones will become more expensive, by 10 to 12%, and laptops by 20 to 30%. The reason for the price increase is the introduction of a technological levy and a higher VAT.
As I said, inflation will intensify, and we still don't really understand by how much. Right now, I'm starting to collect reports about possible price increases next year. Some fragmented reports are coming in, but they're quite alarming. People from the alcohol market are telling me that in the first quarter, they will raise prices by as much as 15% at once. Then there's information that many industries are preparing to raise prices by up to 30% for various goods. Then there's news that a telecommunications operator, for example, is proposing to increase the VAT rate and other charges. They're also planning to raise utility rates by almost 15%.
Russia entered 2026 in the cold, without water or electricity. Widespread utility failures only highlight the crisis. The budget is in deficit, oil revenues are falling, military spending is rising, banks are accumulating bad loans, and prices are hitting the population hard. It seems that 2026 will be the year of economic collapse for the aggressor country.
A luxurious palace with an area of over 9,000 square meters and a guest house of almost 5,000 square meters. Plus a separate building for staff, a technical facility, and a helipad. And below, there's a private embankment, a pier, and an artificial beach with white sand. Journalists have uncovered yet another Putin estate, this time in Crimea, valued at more than 10 billion rubles. Want to see the opulent resort luxury belonging to the dictator? Let us show you.
The Black Sea and the unreal beauty of Crimea. It's me and Aya. It is right here that Putin built yet another residence. A royal palace of 9,000 square meters and a smaller guest house of 5,000 square meters. Higher up the slope are buildings for staff, some technical facilities, and a new helipad. A winding road leads down to the main house. It might not be visible from here, but the house is gigantic, over 9,000 square meters. Further on, there are more gardens, and right by the sea below, there's something unclear. From a distance, it might look like a park or some kind of terrace, but in reality, it's the roof of a huge building. A 5,000 square meter building integrated into the landscape. At the very bottom, there's the embankment itself, where workers are bustling about, and there's a pier and an artificial beach with white sand. This dacha was originally intended for a completely different owner. Viktor Yanukovych planned his summer nest here. People broke in there as well and discovered a gigantic construction project disguised as a sanatorium renovation. Centuries-old trees were cut down, the beach of the neighboring sanatorium for Chernobyl victims was seized, and of course the villa itself. The building was already almost completely constructed and was truly impressive.
A stately palace, a true people's palace.
But Euromaidan put an end to his plans, so the legitimate one settled not in Crimea, but somewhere near Moscow. Yanukovych was also unable to finish building his dacha after the Russian annexation of the peninsula. Putin set his sights on this picturesque spot by the Black Sea.
It's a good place, a beautiful place.
Just a year after the Russian occupation, a Russian court declared the construction illegal. But instead of demolishing it, the property was handed over to the Presidential Property Management Department of the Russian Federation. And then, this state property unofficially became personal property. Putin hid his new asset, or at least tried to, through his oligarch friends. In 2016, the abandoned palace was taken over by Putin's closest friends, the Kovalchuk oligarchs, through several of their companies. There's really nothing surprising about this. We've seen this kind of thing before. Putin's official state dacha on Valdai also, according to documents, belongs to the Kovalchuks, and the Presidential Property Management Department leases this land from them. Now let's see how all of this is set up. Here's the palace on Cape Aya. It belongs to a company called Berwick, and Berwick in turn is owned by a company called Golden Gate. Its owners are classified. We have a document like this. It's a power of attorney from the General Director of Golden Gate to represent the company's interest at the tax office. It mentions 3 surnames. These are the lawyers Belkin, Ulyanov, and Shakov. We're very familiar with these names. A power of attorney for managing the joint stock company Binom, which owns LLC Complex, the company that owns Putin's palace in Gelendzhik, was also issued in the names of this same trio. See how everything is so symmetrical. Beautiful. But the Kremlin got burned not only because of their ties to the Kovalchuks. There's also a line in the palace's project documentation that gives Putin away. The facility must meet the security requirements of the Federal Protective Service, which specifically protects Putin. And of course, the construction company. In my hands, I have something like a presentation of the property. Right here at the bottom, the company that designed and is building this Crimean dacha is listed. Management company Credo. This is a very complex and well-known company to us. They have been involved in almost all of Putin's official and unofficial residences. For example, in Valdai, they built a tea house in the Chinese style. In Gelendzhik, they built an underground ice complex. In Krasnaya Polyana, they built Putin's reception house. And here in Crimea, as we can see, is also their handiwork. They turned Yanukovych's once modest dacha into a Putin palace with imperial pretensions. The central part of the house is decorated with a massive pediment and pilasters, while the western and eastern wings feature porticos with columns. A frieze depicting the key milestones in the history of Crimea's development runs around the perimeter of the building. Here, obviously, it's just a picture, but just in case, let's compare it with the footage. Indeed, right here under the roof, there's the frieze. Unfortunately, we can't see whether the milestone with the little green men and the referendum at gunpoint is depicted there. But I'm sure it is. The house is enormous. As you can see, it stands on a steep slope. That's why, from the front side, all we see is the main entrance with the arcade and a single row of windows. But from the back, it's truly beautiful. Here, for comparison, is a document with a photo record of what Putin's builders found at Yanukovych's dacha when they started work. And here's what it looks like now.
The Crimean residence is not much different from Putin's other residences. It's the same tasteless luxury as always.
There's so much of this luxury that it's starting to make me feel a bit sick. So I'll just focus on one thing. See those faucets? 1, 2, 3. Are those supposed to be little roses or something? Do you know how much they cost? Go ahead, try to guess the amount in your head. Have you guessed? Here's the correct answer. Almost 3 million rubles. For that amount, you could buy a studio apartment, for example, in Sochi. Or you could get these 3 little flowers, a faucet, and a shower head. But if that were all, fine. On the wall, we notice towel hooks with the same little roses. There's the same kind of mixer on the sink and 2 more roses here. They're just everywhere. According to the project documentation, there are 15 hardware elements with these roses in this room, for a total amount of over 11 million rubles. And that's just for the faucets, toilet paper holders, and all sorts of robe hooks.
Naturally, a bunker dictator obsessed with health would have a medical office here too, although it's more like an entire hospital.
A general practitioner's office. There's an ultrasound machine here valued at approximately 2 million rubles. An examination and massage table, a wide variety of specialized equipment for lab tests, an electrocardiograph, a physiotherapy device, and various other medical tools. This same room also serves as an ENT doctor's office. The next room is a dental office. There, you'll find a dental unit worth 4 million rubles, an X-ray machine, a surgical dental microscope, an ultrasound device, a neuromuscular stimulation device, and equipment for analyzing the condition of the masticatory muscles and the movement trajectory of the lower jaw. Further down the hallway, you can reach the operating room. There is an operating table worth 4 million rubles, as well as a ventilator, a defibrillator, an anesthesia machine, patient monitoring equipment, an X-ray machine, devices for gastroscopy and colonoscopy, and much more.
The bald man also takes care of his health in the bedroom. Here. He has a specialized piece of equipment for air disinfection.
Let's also pay attention to that far corner over there. There's some strange device there that really doesn't fit in with the expensive interiors. This is an air recirculator disinfector. These are often installed in hospitals, clinics, and other medical facilities. Inside, there are ultraviolet lamps that disinfect the air, killing bacteria and viruses. In my life, I've only met one person who loves these disinfection lamps and insists on putting them in his living spaces. That person is Vladimir Putin. Here's the exact same disinfection lamp in one of his offices, in another office, and here in his Kremlin apartment.
Putin rejuvenates himself in his usual cryo chamber and relaxes in the massage room and plunge pools.
Putin can't live without them. They're in Novo Ogaryovo. Here they are in the palace near Gelendzhik, here in the official residence in Valdai, and here in the mountain estate in Krasnaya Polyana. They're even installed on his yacht. They even hung a TV above the Crimean plunge pools. Vichy shower. This is a table for taking a shower while lying down. And this is also a Putin classic. We found the same one in the Gelendzhik palace. A room with a massage bathtub. Putin likes them in Gelendzhik. These kinds of bathtubs are also found there. And of course, there's a TV right across from the bathtub. And in this room, modestly labeled shower room, is hidden, it seems, the most expensive plumbing we've seen. This German shower system costs 6 million rubles.
Putin doesn't stray from his traditions even when it comes to leisure and entertainment. It's not an aqua disco, of course, but there is a jacuzzi and a pool, as well as a movie theater.
More speakers in this hall than viewers. 15 of them. Their total cost is 7.5 million rubles. After the movie, we go to the club. Here there's a billiard room, a cigar lounge, and a wine cellar. Or perhaps a tasting room, with refrigerators for jaman and cheese. You can sit here with friends, or just enjoy watching the fish by yourself. Here there's a giant concave aquarium as tall as... But
even with all this, the palace is modest, just 10 billion rubles. That's roughly $130 million. The palace in Gelendzhik cost Putin 100 billion rubles, or over $1 billion. But the difference is actually obvious. In Crimea, there are neither vineyards nor a bunker.
This is the largest private residential house in Russia. Its officially documented area is 17,500 square meters. There are dozens of utility rooms here, which are indispensable when you live the life of a true monarch. Rooms for staff, doctors, managers, cooks, cloakrooms for waiters, a meat and fish processing room, a vegetable processing room, a bakery, and an egg processing room. And this is good. A mud storage room, 18 square meters. Obviously, for a comfortable life, President Putin needs a lot of mud, and from the more traditional things. Here there is a cocktail hall from which you can go either to the home theater or to the tasting room. And a wine cellar. Wonderful. And on the first floor there is a gym with tatami mats. Nearby there are lots of interesting rooms like a reading room or a music lounge.
Putin's residence in Valdai, where his sons live with their mother Alina Kabaeva, costs about the same.
And while Putin and his entourage accumulate luxurious property, the residents of Belgorod are left without water, heat, or electricity. Hundreds of thousands of people have been abandoned by the authorities to fend for themselves in the bitter cold. The city is on the brink of a humanitarian catastrophe. This is what Putin has achieved with his barbaric shelling of Ukraine. Here are the details.
They threatened on TV screens that they would turn off the lights in Ukraine and all of Europe. But in the end, they got a total blackout in Russia itself.
Damn. That is absolutely all. There is nothing left at all in the whole city.
A series of explosions preceded the power outage in the entire Russian region. Around midnight, sirens were activated in the Belgorod region, and approximately 10 minutes later, Ukrainian armed forces drones launched an attack on the energy of the occupiers.
Here comes the drone flying overhead. Airplane small and went down. Oh. So where is the air defense?
The Oriol thermal power plant came under attack. So be it. The regional authorities have not officially confirmed this information, but videos posted online show significant destruction at the thermal power plant. Following another successful nighttime missile strike on the Russian Federation, the entire Belgorod region now faces a humanitarian catastrophe.
Hello, dear friends. Unfortunately today, it's not a good morning at all.
Even if reluctantly, the governor of Belgorod region had to admit that the region is facing serious problems. The numbers cheerfully reported by Gladkov are shocking. Nothing like this has happened in modern Russian history.
We currently have 556,000 people lacking electrical power in 6 different municipalities.
But it seems that Gladkov himself doesn't have any problems with electricity. In the background, all the lights are on in the governor's office. Meanwhile, the Kremlin official continues to shock with the scale of the outages in the region. First and foremost,
this affects 1,920 apartment buildings. Almost 200,000 people are without access to water and sewage services.
The main thing is that it's not worse than in the DNR. Other Russians are making jokes online at the expense of their own fellow citizens. The complete paralysis of a major city's life support system in the middle of winter doesn't elicit even a shred of sympathy. No one in Russia is rushing to start fundraisers or bring warm clothes and hot food to the people of Belgorod. The local authorities are also practically doing nothing. They only express deep concern and promise to assemble working groups for consultations. Meanwhile, in the region, people without heating and electricity are literally starting to freeze to death in their apartments.
We do not feel responsible for deaths of these people.
By the way, soon the number of people who have died from the cold in the Belgorod region could reach hundreds, if not thousands. Because of the Baltic cyclone Francis, Erefia is literally being buried in snow. Snowdrifts of 65 centimeters and higher are expected in Russian cities. A blizzard is raging and traffic on the highways is severely hampered. In such conditions, with no electricity, water, or heat, Belgorod is on the verge of freezing and dying out.
The Belgorod region is currently grappling with extremely significant and critical humanitarian challenges in terms of energy supplies and residential heating systems, electricity, and virtually every other essential service. Of course, the region has never before witnessed a catastrophe of this magnitude in its history. And well, this is an incredibly serious unfolding situation.
A Belgorod blogger does not rule out that a partial evacuation may begin in the region. Many residents are already trying to flee from the frontline city, which is without power and shrouded in ice and snow. However, because of the blackout, it is extremely difficult to do so. All the gasoline at gas stations in the region is running out. Drivers are lining up in huge queues for fuel, at least for generators.
This is exactly what the incredibly long lines at local gas stations for emergency generator fuel look like right now.
Gas stations are only allowing 5 liters per person. That's not enough to get out of snowbound Belgorod. And a generator won't last until morning on that amount of fuel either. How will Russians without power keep warm? That's a big question. It seems the city is truly on the brink of a humanitarian catastrophe, and the one personally responsible is Putin, who started the war in Ukraine and keeps shelling our peaceful cities. Now, thanks to the retaliatory actions of the Ukrainian armed forces, Russians too can fully experience all the delights of life without electricity.
If electricity is still in short supply for only a small part of Russians, then basic food products are already scarce for many. Butter is a luxury, margarine is the norm, and meat. On big holidays and on weekdays, you're lucky if you have chicken and so on. Due to the ongoing impact of the war, many ordinary people now have to choose not the best, but the cheapest. How Putin turned imperial dreamers into a gray mass shackled by total austerity. We will explain the details to you in our report.
Russians are increasingly counting not only every kopeck but every bite of food. Now, instead of butter, people spread margarine on their bread. They've switched from pork to chicken and are saving on literally everything.
There's simply no money. Hang in there. All the best to you.
The reason is simple. All of this is the price for the war Putin started against Ukraine. In 4 years of full-scale war, prices in Russia have skyrocketed, while citizens' wallets are getting thinner. Dissatisfaction among the population is growing. The economic crisis is taking its toll.
Everything is more expensive: milk, cream, cheese, everything.
Last week, kids' yogurt was 62 rubles. Today, it's 79.
Well, really everything. All groceries.
Most Russian citizens spent the New Year holidays at home because they don't have extra money for entertainment. And yes, the New Year's table was much more modest than before.
It's clear that the economic situation in Russia is getting worse. There is inflation and wages are only rising in the sector connected to the military-industrial complex. In all other sectors, wages are not increasing. So, of course, the average daily quality of life for an ordinary Russian is getting worse and more difficult.
Since September, it has become clear that Russians are seriously cutting back on groceries. For example, meat purchases among the population have dropped by 7%.
Russians have also reduced their consumption of dairy products since prices for them have risen sharply since the beginning of the year. For instance, the price of raw milk has increased by 30%. Dmitry Mironchikov, managing partner of the Russian consulting company Agromilia, stated that Russians now spread butter on bread not twice a day but only once. They spread it not twice a day but only once.
But pensioners and residents of regions where the standard of living is noticeably lower than in Moscow are suffering the most.
While Moscow is currently doing well in the outlying provinces, especially within the more depressed regions, things are significantly more difficult. This does not apply, for example, to those regions with a military industry because they still have consistent government orders coming in. So for now, things are not bad there at all. But those other regions from which, in fact, there was economic activity, the largest share of contract recruitment, that is, first mobilization and then contract recruitment. And where, in general, the situation was already depressed. There, in 2023 to 2024, there was a certain revival, thanks to the very money that was coming in through these contract soldiers, primarily. But now it is precisely in these regions that people are feeling the real consequences of the war. When, so to speak, not only are there many dead, but also many wounded returning, and there is no work, yet no new jobs appeared.
The crisis in Russia is spreading to more and more sectors of the economy, and the situation in many industries is close to collapse. For example, companies are massively shutting down production programs and revising their development plans. This was reported by the Foreign Intelligence Service of Ukraine.
There is no full-fledged textile base in Russia. There are neither modern factories nor quality fabrics and accessories. Even military uniforms are ordered from China. Against the backdrop of rising taxes and fines, businesses are losing profitability and consumers are losing purchasing power. As a result, Russian fashion has proven incapable to exist without well-known international brands, exposing poverty, technological weakness, and the economy's complete dependence on the outside world. In
this context, it is worth noting that a key factor in the growing problems remains the continued decline in oil and gas revenues. Russian crude oil exports at the end of 2025 and the first days of 2026 showed a sharp decline. These are the consequences of US sanctions imposed because of the war against Ukraine.
The problems will be particularly severe and challenging this year because of the massive national budget deficit and the significant drop in global oil prices. All of this is consequently leading to the urgent need to raise taxes already. Furthermore, the federal government has completely discontinued and abandoned the program for restoring dilapidated and emergency housing and relocating the people living there. Social programs are being cut and salaries in the public sector are not being increased. And accordingly, we see that prices in stores are, of course, rising because, as I already mentioned, taxes are going up, gasoline prices are rising, and so on down the list.
Experts note that despite the significant crisis, the Kremlin disregards the Russian people. On the contrary, it immediately tightens the belts of its citizens in order to continue the bloodshed in Ukraine.
All the scenarios are bad. There simply aren't any good or sustainable scenarios for the future. Because an economy that is focused exclusively on war cannot continue to function in the long run. And in fact, the collapse of the Soviet Union showed us exactly how this kind of specialized war-oriented economy can ultimately lead to the destruction of a state. In this sense, the economic situation will be even worse for Russia's economy. And as many financial experts and analysts suggest, the problems that are expected are not even comparable to the historic 1998 financial crisis and default because that default was caused solely by the government bond pyramid scheme. But now it could happen that all the state's obligations could be completely and utterly wiped out.
But of course, hardly any Russian will dare to protest openly in public for fear of ending up in prison for a very long time. Meanwhile, experts predict that the situation will deteriorate literally every single week.
It seems that the warming of relations between Putin and Trump is coming to an end. The US president is giving the green light to sanctions that are disastrous for the Russian economy. More on this coming up.
While Moscow continues to pretend it's ready for negotiations, Washington is moving from words to actual pressure tactics. US President Donald Trump has given the green light to a bipartisan bill to strengthen sanctions against Russia. The decision was announced by Republican Senator Lindsey Graham, one of the authors of the document. According to him, the bill had been in preparation for several months and has now received the political approval of the White House.
This is a very timely decision. Ukraine makes concessions for peace, while Putin only talks, continuing to kill innocent people.
The key idea of the bill is to strike not only at Russia itself, but also at those who continue to finance its war, terrorizing and killing civilians every day. The document grants the US president the authority to punish countries that buy cheap Russian oil, thereby fueling Putin's war machine. First and foremost, China, India, and Brazil could fall under these sanctions. The bill provides direct levers of pressure on these countries, from financial restrictions to trade sanctions, in order to force them to reconsider their cooperation with Moscow in the energy sector.
The United States is still continuously making various attempts, in one way or another, to win over the Russian Federation. This plan is not being shelved because it is part of the US confrontation with China. Another aspect of the issue is that it isn't working, but the US has not admitted that it will abandon these attempts. These initial attempts may be more friendly or sometimes less friendly in nature.
But instead of stopping, the Kremlin is looking for a loophole to bargain. According to Reuters, the Russian dictator hopes to persuade the American president to trade Venezuela for Ukraine. The Kremlin raised this issue back during Trump's first presidential term.
I don't subscribe to this version because the first term and the second term are very different in this context. Back then it was like, let's make a deal so that Putin doesn't attack. But now Putin has attacked, and attacked in such a way that he actually doesn't know how to get out of it. And before that, it was a very powerful state. I mean, in Trump's mind, unbeatable, nuclear, with a large army, a big economy, and vast territory. Well, everything, just the way Trump likes it. Everything is big, but all that bigness ran up against, from Trump's perspective, a small Ukraine, and it forced everything in the world to change.
That's exactly why today, dividing the world the way Putin and Trump wanted to during Trump's first term as president is no longer a viable option.
The US is now confronting a kind of global alternative system that operates bypassing the US and its sanctions, which is almost entirely tied to Chinese industry and includes almost all Venezuelan oil, Iranian oil, and to a large extent, Russian oil. This is a resource for Chinese oil refining. And it is with this global empire, so to speak, which is scattered across different jurisdictions, which, as we recently saw in the incident with the ship, is capable of changing flags, where countries, so to speak, provide mutual support and back each other up. This global empire remains in place. And it will, let's put it this way, this is not something the US can ignore. Because as a matter of fundamental principle, this global empire, with specific and dedicated efforts with strategic capabilities, will increasingly diminish the role of the United States on the international stage.
Today, Ukraine has proven that even against a superpower, it is capable of dictating the rules. And now it is Kyiv and its allies who are determining what the terms of peace will be. And the tighter the West turns the screws, the faster it will happen. The Russian Federation will have to choose between making concessions or losing the last remnants of its influence on the world stage.
This was the program Your Money. We show the truth about how Putin's criminal regime and his war are affecting all Russians. Thank you for watching us. Broadcasts air every week on Tuesdays at 1800, exclusively on the Freedom TV channel.